Events in Russia have called into question Vladimir Putin's authority. But as the conflict grinds on and Ukraine vies for dominance, it looks possible this war may only have one true winner: China's leader, Xi Jinping.
When this war ends, China will be in prime position to take advantage of a new world order that is emerging.
So why could China come out on top?
China's position is that it is a peace-loving giant and neutral in this war, but it's a pro-Russian pseudo-neutrality. The big gap between the West and China is that across European capitals, in Washington and other allies, we want Vladimir Putin to pay a high price for his war of aggression. China wants Putin to pay no price at all. China doesn't care who ends up in control of Luhansk or Donetsk, but China does see opportunities to use the war in Ukraine to advance a few core national interests. It wants to divide the West, to split Europe from America. They want to delegitimize the NATO defense alliance. And finally, China wants to delegitimize and demonize sanctions imposed on Russia. China is coldly calculating that by refusing to take sides, it could, at the end of this war, end up as the only important friend of a weakened Russia and as the indispensable security guarantor and rebuilder of a shattered Ukraine. You could imagine that Xi Jinping is embarrassed about being best friends with a loser. That's not good in China's dog-eat-dog world of politics. But actually, China coldly calculates there are opportunities in a Russia that is weakened and more dependent on China, just as long as it's not so weak that it falls apart and spreads chaos on China's borders. Some Western governments were really skeptical that China could be an honest peace broker. It was so clearly on Russia's side. But now, because the leader of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, says that he wants China at the table, you're now seeing people at least willing to let China explain what it thinks. Zelensky knows that Ukraine will only be safe if there are serious security guarantees that Russia won't just try this again. And the reconstruction of Ukraine is going to involve an extraordinary amount of money and construction companies, and China is good at both of those. Russia has burned its bridges with European neighbours, customers for its energy, in ways that are not going to be fixed for a long time. That leaves Russia looking east and realizing that for all its fears of a rising China, it doesn't have a lot of alternatives. When China looks at the globe to look at areas where it could advance its interests because it is so much more dominant over Russia, look at places like the Arctic, where Russia has actually been quite wary of letting China take advantage of melting sea ice, creating new shipping lanes, new opportunities to build ports as climate change unlocks the Arctic. But maybe Russia won't be in the same position to say no when China comes knocking. This war in one corner of Europe is reshaping the map of the world order. Look at India, a country that buys most of its advanced weapons from Russia, but has serious border disputes with its neighbor China. Now India is more receptive than it has ever sounded to defense partnerships with America. Why? Because if you had a future conflict between India and China, the fear in Delhi is that an all-powerful China might pick up the phone to Moscow and say, don't send more weapons to India. China is patiently waiting for us to get tired of this war. And then they think a colder, more brutal world order will emerge, in which might does make right, and Russia doesn't pay a high price for its aggression, and we learn to accommodate great powers. And that is a world order that could suit China very well.